let us call to order.
Okay.
I have asked Daryl, I gave it to him at last minute, so it may not be great, but I asked him for the implications.
Dear God, help lead us to do what's best for the residents of the two counties we serve. Also, take care of the needs of our staff and guide us to make the proper decisions. In His name, we pray. Thank you.
All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to begin with the swearing in of the new board member. And so our...
Get right to it.
Randall, if you come around to the table.
Have you got a camera or something? Oh, there you go. Oh, it's that beat up old mirror.
Actually, and it's being recorded.
Is it a new
so-
iPhone?
Oh, we're all, I'm gonna take pictures and send to you.
Okay.
It's a long list.
Not really. I'll try not to give you too much to have to mention the time. Okay, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I
I,
state your name.
Randall Wallace,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will uphold the Constitution and bylaws
that I will uphold the Constitution and bylaws
of the Waccamaw Regional Transportation Authority,
of the Waccamaw Regional Transportation Authority,
that I will support the goals of the authority
that I will support the goals of the authority
and abide by the wishes of the majority of board members,
and abide by the wishes of the majority of board members,
that I will not allow my private interest
that I will not allow my private interest
to influence my conduct in authority matters,
to influence my conduct in authority matters,
that I will faithfully perform the duties of my office
that I will faithfully perform the duties of my office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Glad to have you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Welcome, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We can do introductions as a part of the roll call.
It's a lot easier than last time.
Welcome aboard.
We should.
We'll do double duty. We have one member of our board calling in on the phone, and we also have a staff member calling in on the phone as well.
Kathleen D'Angelo.
Here.
Kitty D'Angelo is from North Myrtle. That's what she represents.
I met you at the electric bus.
Right.
That sounds like a nightclub.
Could be, could be.
Darrell Ikoff.
Here.
New revenue
I
generator.
live in the Conway area, been here for 10 years, moved here from the Midwest.
And who are you appointed by?
Well, delegation.
A delegation
Three of us
appointee.
got a delegation.
Wilbur James.
Here,
And
better known as Mickey.
Mickey, are you a delegation appointee or
It's
you're a
Myrtle
council?
Beach, Myrtle Beach.
City of Myrtle Beach appointee? Okay.
Sorry.
Ms. Lily Jean is not with us, and she represents Georgetown County. Marvin King.
Here, represent Horry County Council, teacher at TCU.
Joseph Lazara.
Here, I represent the city of Georgetown.
Rob Sheehan.
I'm here, I'm chair, I'm a county appointee. This is the first year of my 2-year appointment as chair. The way we work, there's also a 2-year prior experience as a vice chair. So this is my 3rd year in this type of role.
Bernard Silverman.
Here, and I represent the delegation. I've known Randall just here and there for some time now.
Randall Wallace. We're glad to have you. And Randall is Horry County. And Ivory Wilson.
I'm represent the city of Conway.
And Mr. Wilson is one of the founders of Coast RTA.
Been on board 35 years. Time to get off.
You say that every year.
Now, you know you want to stay.
But it is worth noting that Ivory Wilson was one of the first 2 or 3 people who came home from service with the decision that they thought that Horry County needed mass transportation. And they put their heads together, and what resulted back, how many years ago? 35 years ago? Not that he's counting, but he'll give us the days and hours, I'm sure, if we ask. But that their conversations, their discussion was really the beginning of the development of Horry County as a transportation authority. And of course, we cover both Horry County and Georgetown County as well. So.
And the idea was conceived in Germany.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Want to acknowledge our visitor? He's not really a visitor because he's been here so long. He's
No,
like the
it's Wade's
brother-in-law
not a
who can't
visitor.
live with us.
Yes, board member.
He's trying to get back on board.
Yeah. We do. Have you got anything to share in terms of your comments? Down to Florida.
He's sorry we left this.
Georgia's been, and so her position is vacant, and Sid's position is the one that you are filling. Sid had a nice working relationship as a vice president with HTC. And so during the time of his involvement as a board member, we were able to put on all of our buses Wi-Fi that allows us to track and allows the public to track with a free app the routes of any one of our buses, where they are, when they're due to arrive, length of time to arrival, and that sort of thing. And so we've really gotten very good public response to those apps.
But that was not free, we paid for it.
It was not free, but
I
we
want that to be, I want
Right.
that to be noted.
No,
They
no.
did not give it to us
we
free.
relied on his guidance and his input in that. Initially, we thought it was going to be much more expensive than it turned out to be, but it is not free. But it is on all of our fixed routes. And of course, we have two types of bus routes. We have fixed route, which are the standard routes that we run. And then we have demand response for individuals with disabilities. How many of those buses, transit buses, do we have that are on the
We
demand
have
side?
10 vehicles and 5 to 8 peak service.
5 to 8 during any at peak time for individuals with disabilities. Okay, so we've acknowledged the visitor. We've got no public comment. Brian, do you have any employee recognition?
I don't have any specific employee recognition, just as a board is probably aware, we're on the home stretch for
You keep that. You keep that.
for summer service. We're in that tweener area where the school system's gone back to school, and we're still running the entertainment shuttle, so there'll be some overtime here in the next couple of weeks. The drivers don't have too much of an issue with, I don't think. But I think overall it's been a good summer so far from an operations standpoint. Ridership is holding steady or even rising in a lot, especially on our standard routes. So I think things are going pretty well so far for what's been a tough summer from a weather perspective and those types of things. I think we're doing pretty good.
Been a tough summer from a tourist perspective as well. The early part of the summer was extremely wet. And we've got there's a tournament on the Myrtle Beach National Golf Course, which I live on the south course. And the guy, as I was walking the dog, I had my normal chats with these people. And they were terribly upset that there wasn't enough rain right now for the tournament that was being played today on the
No
south
rollers.
course.
You had rain yesterday? We had rain yesterday.
You know, where I live, it lasted for 1 nanosecond, and that was it. It barely got enough water on the
Yeah, and it
windshield.
doesn't work.
But we operate both the public service, which is a for fare basis, and then we have the transportation, the shuttle downtown that operates from, through Labor Day, from,
Till Monday, 9 a.m. to midnight.
yep. It'll end in another 2 weeks.
As soon as we come out here.
It's not a week. Yes. All right. Can I ask for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, we have service pack report. I am on that committee, but
With minutes.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sorry.
the minutes.
you're right, the approval of the agenda. Yep.
We just did.
I thought we just did the agenda, yeah. I'm not that good at this stuff, all right. All right.
I
How
have
about
a-
approval of the minutes?
I have a,
Question?
no, my first name is spelled incorrectly. It's all right.
That's all right.
I'm very fussy about my.
That's what happens when you use spell check.
I know.
I'm sorry. I will make sure
I-
it's correct. Should be an A instead of an E.
I,
Okay. We have a motion to accept the minutes.
I move that we have a motion to accept the
And
minutes
do we have
as amended.
As amended. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comment?
You okay with the amendment?
All those in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Now we're up to item 10, Service PAC Committee Report. The chair of our Service PAC Committee is not here, that's Ms. Lily Jean. And I had to miss that meeting as well, I was teaching. And so I will. Pardon
We
me?
didn't have
Didn't
it.
have it.
We didn't have it.
There, another reason why I can't remember what happened.
Oh, we're
You know,
really together today.
Wait, you're gonna understand like we're setting you up for a failure.
That's okay. I'm good with that. Why should it be any different from my wife or children?
I have a couple of things relating to service impact, even though we didn't have the meeting in the last one we had, I wasn't here, and in July, I think, but one is the AECOM. The AECOM is the people who are doing the consulting on the signs, the sign project. And their update in April said that they would be having, installing bus signs in, I think, August. So we're not up to that yet. I'm not surprised we're not up to that, but I'm wondering if we should be concerned. Their first update, their first thing was like something before August, I forget what it was. The second update, the April update, was August. So now we're really in September. So is this something we need to be concerned about? I mean, they're getting paid, I mean, they're not doing us a favor, and I know you're a consultant and know them well. And
Yeah, I have information on this in the GM report,
Okay.
but we can talk about it. It's, they've given me task orders 2 and 3 that begin implementation of signs.
Okay.
All I'm doing is waiting for the grant to be approved, which should be before September 30th, and we'll give them notice to proceed. So we should see signs going up here very shortly, next 60 days.
Well, once we approve the sign company, it's a 45-day turnaround for all the signs.
So it could be well into October.
So, I mean, that's what we talked about before too, so just keep that 45-day
So,
window.
so the grant, that's true, the grant, we gotta get poles and signs procured.
So we're probably not talking about 2018, and probably talking early next year, is that right?
Well, I would hope not, but, the grant should be approved prior to September 21st, which is when the tram system goes down. So we've got, the reason why I know it will be done is because FTA doesn't want us to have any 5339 funds sunsetting. So we've got it in that hopper so that it's expedited. And we can give them notice to proceed pretty quickly after that. And we're already on the path to getting them procured, right? Getting the signs procured. We haven't put it in order yet?
No, we were waiting for the approval, because that Kevin sent the sign up to AECOM for DOT to approve it.
So there's a
So-
certain,
So we'll get that squared away. We'll have an update for you at the September committee
That's-
meeting.
So once we get that
Which is the
approval, then we have a DVE who's quoting it along with some others, so.
So we should have a lot of this all these dates hard and fast by then and let you know exactly what's gonna happen. But I would hope this year, for sure.
well, I think Bertie's question reflects a certain amount of skepticism, at least on several members of the board, that this thing is going to happen in a timely way. You know, part of it is we've been discussing it for 3 years, and we're, finally hitting the road running, but some of the early paperwork indicated that signage would have even been up by now, based upon the early discussions. But it does sound as if it's drifting into October, November, before we begin to see physical signage going up. And then once it goes up in stages. So we're well into 2019 before
Yes.
we see us.
It'll be
Several hundred
a
signs.
lengthy project.
Okay. Bernie, anything else about the service pack?
Yeah, I just want to make everyone aware that, and I think everyone may know this already, but we're losing some revenue with our fare boxes. I don't know that, and we've talked about this before, and shuffling the cards and whatnot, but I would say we're losing, and this is a guess, and I don't know, I think we're losing 10% or more of our fares due to the machines not working when people get on the bus. You know, they just don't work, that's all there is, and I don't know what to do about it. I mean, if we're losing, you know, a couple $100, a fare box costs $10,000.
So if it's not working, you mean they don't collect anything?
Correct. Correct.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think the board is aware of this as a general condition. So how many fare boxes are down out of how many that are actively running?
It's not, I mean, all the buses, all the ones that are out on the buses right now are working when they leave the shop.
Yeah.
It's just, you get humidity, you get, there's a lot of conditions out there. If somebody stuffs a wet card in there on purpose, that can shut one down. It's a problem. I don't think it's 10%. It might be closer to 5%, and that's
Yeah,
$20,000 to
and I
$25,000
yeah.
a year. But I do have that as one of my goals in the budget discussion, is to work on reducing that problem.
Well, you're saying if the fare box is not working, then people doesn't pay?
Right.
Yeah, we don't
You don't think
get too
that?
hung up about, you know, if it's not working, then just get them on and go, because it'll slow down.
Well, you had a.
Well, do we pull the bus off the street?
A
No.
full load of people
No.
not paying?
No?
Well, without any way to accept the money securely, you certainly don't want the drivers putting it in a plastic box or something like
I
that.
don't think they're allowed to do that.
I can
Yeah,
see
yeah,
why
it's not
you
allowed.
would not collect the money, but it would seem that we should have a more detailed itemization of fare boxes that are down, at least going backwards. So if we're asking for the month of July and what we have in August, we should have a quick response to what proportion of the fare box recovery time was downtime.
Well, you probably could do that, the driver could do that. I mean, if you get on the bus and the fare box doesn't work and you pay no fare, the driver still counts you.
Yes.
He manually counts you. But if you're gonna be asking the driver, see, you could ask the driver to say, how many people got on but didn't pay? But the driver's got an awful lot going on.
Yeah, I know that answer. I mean, the system has data, and we've run that report before, and it wasn't as rampant a problem as we thought it was at the time. Now, I think summer
The weather's been
has a
terrible.
lot to do with that.
Weren't we supposed to do something, or trying to do something about the humidity in those boxes way back?
Well, we can look at card stock, look at buying more expensive card stock that would handle the humidity a little better. And that's not the only issue. I mean, you know, giving change cards and things like that are not the only reason why a fare box might go down. I think that, to Mr. Silverman's point, we are seeing an erosion in the revenue associated with fares, and that is probably the reason why we're seeing this, because the fare boxes aren't working as consistently as they should be. Now, the problem kind of goes away in the winter months when it's a lot drier out and things like that. But the fare boxes present a real issue for us because they haven't been fully depreciated, and replacing them is going to be an expensive item.
Yeah, there were a lot of money when we bought it.
So-
Did you say 14,000?
10,000.
Well, I mean,
Something like that, it was very expensive, way more than it seemed like it should be.
if we could go to a less cash reliant type of system, it could be a lot cheaper than that. But it's still going to be an investment per vehicle in order to fix it. So we do need to do some planning work associated with that.
So you can't put change in things in this, you have to have a card.
No, you can put change in the dollar bill.
But,
You can put anything in.
Once it's down, it will.
You can jam the dollar bill collector
No.
and with something else, and then it's down until that gets out of there.
Now, very often when it gets to the transfer center, Mr. DeAndrea, Mr. Allison, they can fix it. They know what to do, you know, they just go out there and they, I don't know what they do.
But do we have is it feasible to at least record the time the fare box goes down, the time and date?
I have that data.
You do have that.
Fare box tells me when it's down.
Oh, it just stopped working, yeah, okay.
So we can get failure reports.
Let's get a new report.
Well, if you have the data, maybe I'm way off at 10%, I don't know. I mean, that's just my feeling, but, I mean, if you know it.
Well, we did this last summer and it was like 5%. So it's $25,000, $30,000 out of our total revenue.
Yeah, okay.
Can we get a report?
You said
in
30,000?
30,000 for the year.
That's a lot of money.
But there's also a little bit of ill will
I
when
got my
somebody
face
pays
down for
for a
that.
transfer and then other people get on without paying and they've already paid, you know.
So,
There is that.
Ms. Lynette, can you make a record that, a request from the board that we have a fare box failure report for the September board meeting?
I got one other thing.
For the September board meeting?
I
Well-
got two other things.
I mean, I think you just want to see how often it's
Did you
happening.
ride the
That's all,
buses?
yeah.
And you
From
know-
that, we can extrapolate something about the fiscal, impact of that. But let's start with
Yeah, but I can see how many frees.
how many fares we lost and, length of time it was happening.
I said, do we think the bigger problem is not the box itself and stuff going into it? It could be a both, but where do we think the bigger humidity is, or?
I don't really have a good tab on that. I think it's both. I think it's a lot of everything. The fare boxes are getting old.
Well, we have fare boxes on the trolleys that we don't use. We have some built-in spares we don't ever,
Yeah, I have about 50 fare boxes total and,
So we have bunch-
32 vehicles.
we have a ton of
There's only
spares out there.
32, yeah.
Okay.
So when they leave in the morning, they're fine. They're in working
Well,
order.
if we're getting old and worn out, and we got some on trolleys which are never used, I don't know how old they are, but they're used less frequently than the ones we use every day, I'm just saying it.
Those, they're called trims. The top part of the fare box, they get interchanged
Okay.
between buses all the time.
All right,
We're refurbishing them. We do a lot of preventive maintenance on them.
okay.
So there's lots of reasons why one could go down. It could have a power issue, and there's all
Well,
sorts of issues.
Rob asked for you get
But
next
they are-
meeting, we'll have more
But
information.
they're getting tired, and we don't have a good idea of.
Brian, part of your answer suggests that they might intentionally jam. If we were to ask the
I
drivers.
wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't either.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, if we were to ask the drivers, if they ask the drivers if it is oftentimes a reoccurrence, or a reoccurrence, rather, I don't mean to be redundant, of the same passenger, would they say, yeah, we tend to get the same people jamming it up?
They probably know that.
Yeah,
Not what to say.
there is some of that happening.
I'm gonna
And
try.
we know who they are. But I don't have a clear understanding of how we're handling that person.
I don't know.
The bus
So,
driver.
but I don't think that is the main reason why these things are going down.
All right, well, let's have a report in September, and we'll try to make some sense of it.
All right, two other quick
Is
things.
there any way that we can sell passes here at the terminal?
We do.
We do sell drug passes.
Or can you do
Not
that?
at Myrtle Beach, but here in Conway we sell them.
I mean, when the fare box go down, they'll pass through the people getting on the bus.
The cash handling issue.
I mean,
Yeah, no, you
can we-
can't, you can't, well, unless they're all getting off and going into the counter to pay for a pass, but a lot of times the pass, that's the problem, that's why the fare box isn't working, is because it won't read the pass.
When it
So-
leaves here,
Or
it's
it
working.
won't take a dollar bill, because the dollar bill changer is jammed or something.
Yeah, but I mean, then you don't put the dollar bill, people pay here at the terminal, then you don't go.
You couldn't do that
I don't know.
if you were changing buses, because you get off one, get right on the other. I mean, it would delay it.
We're
I
all
mean,
on
you
the
would,
route.
you wouldn't catch it on, but you would catch someone. If it's possible.
Well, I mean, that's certainly an option for the rider, but, you're not gonna clear a bus off to have them go pick up a pass.
What you're really gonna have to do is have someone on the bus beside the driver,
Hang on, Mickey.
seeing what's going on, really, you know? It's hard for the driver. Driver's got so much on
So you want to
his-
put conductors on the bus?
Yeah, I like that.
They don't have to be known as, you know, like the,
Go ahead, Mickey. Brian is being a little snarky.
I'd be happy to get on the bus.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I don't mean to be snarky.
No.
Yes, sir, yes.
So, make something clear on this, are we talking about how much maybe taken off of, or the addition in the end?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Okay, are we talking about the amount of revenue or the condition these boxes are in?
Well, we're talking about both of them. The fare boxes themselves are aging, and so that's not great condition, and the replacement cost of a single fare box is $10,000. But Bernie's question also suggested that there might be as much as 5 to 10% in fare box revenue that is lost from the process as well. Brian had suggested that sometimes something as simple as jamming a wet or a moist dollar bill or ticket into the machine might in fact cause it to jam. When Brian is also saying that typically when the buses leave in the morning, the fare boxes are working. And they can get cleaned out by the end of the day, or at the end of the day, but that we do not take the time during the day to either clean them out or to come up with an alternative payment system. Instead, once it's jammed, it's typically down for the day.
Do we just, okay, another question.
You got it,
Yeah.
That's right.
When the buses come back in, is anybody, can we go in, after they receive the money, do they actually take money any damage or anything down in them? That's the question.
Mr. Chair, I think we need to suspend this and get on with financial before Mark has to leave at 10:20.
Mickey, I've talked about this in the GM report. Can you hold your question for a little bit?
Yeah, wait, I'm sorry, wait.
Yeah, we gotta get to the financial stuff, so because Marvin's on a time constraint.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, Bernie?
I do, but I'll hold them for later.
All right. Moving on to the Finance Committee report.
All right, so, we only met, what, 10, 20 times? No, I'm joking. About 3 times between our last board meeting. So we had a lot of discussions about mainly the budget, and we'll get to that, but also a little bit about our monthly reports, which actually, do we just have,
Randall, the other individual who's on the phone line is our finance officer.
do we need to?
And so he has been a part of the Finance Committee meetings, and you'll
I just
see a
thought
voice
that.
on the phone.
We probably, you're right, we didn't have a board meeting
Yeah,
since the June was released.
so it's actually 2 months of financial. But we got year to date, so.
I was here that day, though.
Yeah, you were. You and Rob, I think, showed up that day.
All right, so if I can turn your attention to, I guess our income statement, page 3.
2 and 3.
2 and 3, sorry.
Page 2 of the July financial.
Yeah. And I guess our focus really would be on the year-to-date columns. So again, it looks a little red, but the good thing is overall, I guess you can say, is as we look at closing the year out, we're pretty close as far as the total expenses. If you look at the year-to-date variance, we're off by about 1%. So it's not.
Randall, we last year, we moved our fiscal reporting to October 1 as our timeline. It used to be July 1. So we're playing a little bit of catch-up on some of these.
Page 3. So we have 2 months left from this point, I should say, from that July 31st. Yeah. So we have, we're off again by about 1%, which, as you look at the numbers, is not small value given our total budget. So talking about $60,000 off in operating expenses. I guess it's a little compounded as you consider, again, we just talked about some of the fare box revenue and some of that. So get up to about $70,000 again, about 1.5% loss. And one of the things I would like to just talk quickly about is just kind of the review of that in regards to our revenues. As you flip the page, you consider where our revenue stands. Yeah.
Page 3.
Yeah. So, again, right, not as much red, so it helps a little bit. However, as you look at our overall change of position, obviously, we're looking at a loss for the year. So that's going to be considered as we move into the budget side of it. But Brian, do you have any?
Well, just, we have done some work with Finance Committee on what our estimate to complete is for the year, and while I don't see us recovering from fuel and legal and professional and transit salaries, I think that number at the bottom is going to be closer to 40,000 than it is 60,000 at the end of the year. So, and I think we have the revenues to cover most of that. Although you'll see later on in the budget discussion, you know, it was a really tight year. We kind of knew that going into it. So, you know.
And do you feel like, as far as that capital revenue, I know we talked about it, but do you feel like we'll?
Yeah, and that looks like a big red splotch there on the sheet, but a lot of that is because certain projects haven't hit. I don't know, it'd be good to kind of get with Finance Committee, I think, to work out, and Ron, you can weigh in on this. We tried to kind of use the schedule down at the bottom of page 3 to sort of give you all a heads up on where certain capital projects are going and how, you know, how they're progressing and that sort of thing. But I'm not really sure how to deal with that overall, because you can put the budget numbers in there, but any number of things can railroad a capital project and delay them, and you know, it's not like we've lost 295,000. It's just we haven't spent 295,000. The money's still there, and so it's, you know, maybe it's the way we have to do it, and just take it with a grain of salt. I don't know.
So Brian, I'm trying to remember the meeting from the Finance Committee meeting. As I recall, you indicated you thought that the total operating expense would continue to be in the red as we careen toward the end of September. However, that would be offset by an increase in revenue. So I think it was your belief that our operating profit or loss would in fact be a positive as we get toward the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, and I'll hedge on that a little bit. I think it's gonna be closer to 0, but it should be right at the number.
So that's 68,058 on page 2. You're saying it's going to trend back towards 0 as we end the fiscal year.
65,808.
Probably not that one.
No, that.
Where will it show if it's
Let's
not?
look at the one on the bottom of
Yeah,
the page.
40.
Page 2, bottom of the page, 41,000.
Well, that 41.
That's where we're at right now. That should drop down to like 20, and we should have the revenues to cover that.
Yeah, the operating one only brings the revenues from like the fare box.
Got it.
Bringing other stuff.
So your projection is that would be closer to 20 in the red, and on the revenue side, we should see something above 20, which
Yes.
would bring that in close to the net of that to 0.
Yes. You're gonna see a different number later on. I think I'm missing some revenue dollars in it.
And the other number, yeah, the other
In the
number.
budget discussion for 18.
So for page 3, that bottom line number, that change in that position is really.
It's actually positive 46,000 right now, but that's probably gonna go closer to 0 as well.
Yeah. Because that one brings in everything else.
Yep.
That's really your total value. So I think a lot of our discussion in the meetings we've had since the last board meeting has really been to figure out how we stop the loss, month to month and year to date. As we move into fiscal year 19, how we make sure that the budget is right. Any thoughts, questions on July financials? So I think our main session, all these gonna go towards the budget session this week.
Well, let's see,
There.
let's see.
Probably as the weather changes, you won't experience that problem.
So the summer.
A bit cooler and kind of the winter.
Brian, before we convened our meeting, Daryl had mentioned that as we begin to discuss the FY19 budget, and in particular discussing the issue of cutbacks in terms of the staffing, that he wanted to have us have an executive session to have some open discussion about personnel before we are actually asked to vote on that resolution. So I'm gonna leave it up to you to figure out how to move that executive session, which is actually after the approval of the resolutions, how to move that to a time in between general manager's report and resolution, or in between finance committee report and general manager's report to deal with that.
Have it right now if you
Don't we
want to.
want it while you were still here?
That's fine, right?
We should have it now.
Whenever it fits your flow.
Doesn't fit out.
My flow is totally interrupted.
I'm moving, we go into executive session for personnel matter.
All right.
I didn't mean to sound like a child of the Aquarius, trying to keep him on his flow or something to that.
I do believe that you should be, involved in it.
All those in favor of executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, we're going to thank our guests for coming and crossing off for a short period of time.
Where's your where's your film?
And Mr. Twitch.
You can film it.
Could I have a motion to come back from executive session? We're
Make a
back,
motion to come out of today.
I second the motion.
and we're back, we'll accept a second and so forth. No actions were taken in executive session, and the purpose for it was both legal and personnel. All those in favor of coming back from executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We are back in
Did anybody
full
tell
time.
Mr.
Mickey,
Twigg
are you
that
still
we're
with us?
Where's
Mickey
Mr.
left.
Well,
Okay, Ron, are you there?
I'm here, that's all I know.
Could you send Ron a message, let him know we're back from executive session? Where are we? Ron lives much of the time in Toledo.
Mostly in his
just
car.
for background,
He told me in
Ron
his car.
is a wonderful chief financial officer, and needed to move back for medical purposes of his wife toward that area of the country, Cleveland Clinic kinds of area, and things like that.
Very
So
well.
Ron spends a lot of time here, and we've rigged up kind of a what do you call the contact?
Good meeting. Oh,
What meeting?
VPN?
No, with Ron, that
Oh,
he's
the
able,
VPN.
the VPN, a virtual private network, so he can basically do budgeting and that sort of thing for much of us, for what we are. And he's a wonderful accountant. And you might have, if you were there, you might have heard that our last audit went through without a single query, or without a single finding. And that's the first time in a long, long time in the history of the authority. Ever? Okay.
I think so, we didn't.
Ever since
research it.
Ivory Wilson thought of the
I looked
authority,
back.
this is the first time we've had
We never had
a audit without any negative findings.
That's great.
All right, we are back in public session, and we are back, are we done with the finance committee report? And
Well, I think the latter part of the finance committee is just going through the budget, so I was prepared to start talking about the budget.
I got two more things for service committee.
Let's do that in the general manager's report, please.
One is,
You're not listening.
He said, let's do it in the
Just do your
general
stuff
session.
on general manager.
That's fine.
We're all kind of laughing
You might be
because Bernie
covering
comes
it.
in with the
Am I?
Bernie list.
I might.
And it doesn't matter that Bernie is no longer chair of the RTA. Bernie's Bernie list must always be.
I'm gonna be looking around for other people's to-do list.
So I'm looking at,
We have to ride the bus.
That for years.
I'm looking at this page in the back that has, it's my old format for the budget. It's very small, so hopefully you all have your reading glasses.
It follows the resolution.
And so, I don't, obviously you can't project this very well and have people see it because it's laid out such that the revenue sources are across the top and the columns are labeled with letters. And then the expenses are down the left side, and those rows are labeled with numbers. So if you've got a question about a specific number, you can give me
It
a,
follows the resolution.
That's what I was hoping you
It
had.
says
Here's
draft
the-
all in the back.
You got the resolution for the budget, and then the budget's right after the resolution.
so I have slides, but I don't, the slides there's a couple of tables in the slides that we can turn the lights out so you can see in a minute, but,
Let's not put this big thing on the slide.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
sorry, Mr. Wilson.
I'm with
No, not yet.
Okay.
So people can see this.
You tell me.
So some of our assumptions were, we are trying to reduce our dependence on federal dollars. And it's mostly 5307, which is our urban program. We have two programs, Randall, urban and rural program, that are funded through different sources.
Trying to reduce our operating expense dependence on federal dollars.
On 5307, right? You want to use that money for preventive maintenance and other things.
Okay.
And the urban formula works out after GSETs takes their slice off the top, and after we give North Carolina their slice off the top, it's between 1.2 and 1.3 million dollars a year. And you can see under column K, we had 1.5 million in this particular year. So we're spending a little bit more than a year's allocation. After I take that 1.5 out of unobligated balance, I will have about $400,000 to $500,000 in FY18 5307 funds sitting at FTA.
But then Ron says it's not letting him call back
Ron said what?
in. It's not letting him call back in.
Should
you-
be until noon.
Could we get Tom involved in that, please?
Yes,
Bring him back from the attic.
yes.
So I'll show you a table here in a little bit that shows what our experience has been in using those funds over the last few years. Obviously, that formula program has dynamics to it. It goes up and down. Right now, it's on a very small rise. But the point I want to make is there are still $400,000 to $500,000 sitting at FTA that we could use this year if we need to. All right, I don't want to use it. I want to lower our needs for that back down to annual and keep that money in there for, a real rainy day if we need it.
It's not on fiscal year based.
Hmm?
That 400,000, how many years is that good for?
It's the year of appropriations plus 5, so 6
Good.
years.
So you
And
So there are no
any
issues.
of it be used to pay
And we always use last year's money for this year, so we don't touch FY19 this year. What was it?
I think that answers, I was asking if any of that could be used to pay off Conway National Bank.
Well, here's the thing, it could. And the reason why, the FY18 dollars, we could.
Yes.
And the reason why we're able to do that is our percentage of federal participation in the operating of the urban program is about 24%. So I have plenty, that can go all the way up to 50% if we wanted it to. Okay, so I could pull more federal dollars in, and any dollar you put there would add a dollar down here in the bottom of column D for additional local money. Okay, so that's one area. 5311, we spent pretty heavily last year on that. We pulled in some money.
Until Randall, 5311.
5311 is the rural program. It's about a third of our service is rural and 2/3 is urban. Roughly, it oscillates a little bit depending on whether or not the entertainment shuttle is operating or not. And so you can see in column N that I think we spent close to 1.1 million in 5311 in FY18, and that's down to 700,000 in FY19. So we're reducing our dependence on that as well. But if you go over 2 more columns to column P, there's 100,000 in expected 5311 augmentation. This is one of the few numbers on this sheet that is not basically written in stone, okay, under contract in some sort of way. You might have a little bit of movement on the local dollars, but those are all under contract. Dollars are in the bank, and we can use them to spend. So except for this 100, that you may, in Finance Committee, I talked about that every few years, the state gets a waiver to spend intercity funds, which are another slug of money under the 5311 rural program. And they reallocate that to regular rural programs. The intercity funds are used by folks like Southeastern Stages to buy buses, or if there is an intercity connection that you're developing a route, you could use the money for that. And South Carolina does not have a very good history of using those dollars. So they, every few years, apply for a waiver, and that amount could go up to as much as $250,000, depending on what they decide to pull over from that other category.
And when will that happen? When will
Well,
they decide?
that is, they told me back in March that it was gonna happen in June and July. It hasn't happened. It may not happen until next fiscal year, which is still okay because their fiscal year starts on July 1st. So we have 3 months of our fiscal year this year to spend those additional dollars. We have some options on that. Maybe we use those dollars to pay off future paybacks that we have with SCDOT. So there'll be some options on that, depending on how things are going this year.
Paybacks being the shelters, for example.
Yeah, we have 2 more years of that. We have the additional funding that we got this year from them, we're paying back in a couple of slots.
If we use that to pay back the shelter program, the money we save there could be applied to Conway Bank, to accelerate that payback, right? The 3-way there?
Well, you still have to draw it in traditional means. You still have to have the expenses to draw down the money. But yes, we would use less local dollars, and we could conceivably pay off the bank quicker.
Our debt to the state is $75,000 a year. I think it was 5 years and we're in 3. We're done with 3. And that was for the shelter program. Remember that one?
There was some assorted other ones in there too that we're just about to.
But
we are
you're more than halfway through paying.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there are some opportunities here to accelerate our pay down of the debt. And I think the board's direction on sort of taking a step back, let's look at it for a quarter and see if, some of these things are actually working. As far as the plan for budget reductions, makes some sense, and we could just do a mid-year revision to the budget as it relates to this.
Keep in mind as well that the board's passion, at least I would like it to be the board's passion, about paying that debt off as quickly as possible, needs to also be balanced by the fact that there is no more an option to go back to a funding source such as Conway National Bank. Our contract with Horry County is that the new funding arrangement basically precludes any return to that as a funding source. So we don't have a plan B, and if something, which is why we also are arguing for our budget to include a reserve. And it's important that we have our own reserve as we are also paying back the Conway National Bank, because if we don't have our own reserve, when something really bad happens, we're going to really be in trouble. And the agency historically has had little or nothing of reserve. I think we've gotten as high as 15,000 at one point in time. But that is the second articulation of the board in looking at the budget, is that as we go into next year, pay the debt down and build the reserve up as your priority. I'm speaking for the rest of you all, but as your priority in lieu of any type of expansion. I'm going by head nodding. Carol's got
Question about
head
this
nodding.
debt repayment, $60,000. I mean, that
You're talking about retiring this debt in 2021 or 21, I think you said.
Mhm.
So $60,000 a year would not do it, so you're.
It ramps up in 20 and 21. So I think it's 90,000 in 20, and 200,000 in 21 to get to pay it down, 207.
So line number 34 on this spreadsheet. I've got new contacts here, so everybody's being very nice to me because I can't see what the damn on this tiny little print. But line number 34 is, as Bernie pointed out, debt repayment. That's where the Conway National Bank payment line is, and we would like to see it exceed that 60,000
Right.
I'm not necessarily insisting that it has to be in the budget per se, but I am insisting that it has to be increased as we look at it each quarter.
And that will be our goal. We've fully integrated cash requirements into the budget monitoring process so that we don't run into some of the same issues we have in the past. We've laid out the whole year of FY19, and it looks pretty promising in terms of, if all this comes to fruition, we should be in good shape from a cash perspective. And that will make Kathy and Ron's life much calmer. Like I said, all revenue sources are under contract, and some of them don't have written agreements necessarily, but they are firm numbers, except for that 5311 intercity, that augmentation there in column P. Fares, obviously, we need to do some work on how we're dealing with that. And then advertising revenue, we put in a number of 50,000, but obviously Michelle's been doing better than that lately. So depending on our inventory and how that goes.
Can we enhance poor old Lynette's line on lunch, breakfast expense?
Yes,
It's kind of been a standing
We'll get you
joke.
some-
We have
some
muffins.
muffins. We'll get you some
And the
muffins.
question is, at one point, I was crazy enough to say there should be no muffins, but now we've got a strong medical reason for
Who did
muffins.
say that? I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, he did.
Before the
Yeah,
He did?
yeah.
But then now we're back.
Why?
The
So-
muffins are back.
So from a service perspective, this budget incorporates the continuation of routes 2 and 3, Bucksport and Loris, beyond the grant timeline of December 31st. It also has the entertainment shuttle in it, in some form or fashion, 2 buses, 24 hours a day, basically, for 90 days, 91 days. What I wanted to say about
Did you say 24 hours a day or?
24 bus hour, revenue hours,
2 12-hour.
2 12-hour buses.
Oh, thank you. We're not running buses.
For 24 hours, no. Routes 2 and 3 come off of being a pilot program on January 1st, all right? So that means that we will need to begin operating paratransit up there. So my strategy for dealing with that is going to be putting it in the paratransit system. We have new software coming that will hard code those routes into the paratransit scheduling, and then allow people who live within 3/4 of a mile of that route to and have the documented disability to call in trips during those times of those routes. So it's essentially going to become a route deviation type of service.
So Russell, when we have a fixed route,
Random.
Randall, I'm sorry. When we have a fixed route, we are required by law to provide service to individuals with disabilities that are within 2.5 or so miles of that
3/4
fixed route. The Loris Buckport line has been a pilot. When it becomes made something more permanent than that, then that also means we've got to expand our service to individuals with disabilities to now include those lines, unless the line itself is in fact a line that is a paratransit line. And that's what you're suggesting, isn't it?
Right.
So people will, individuals with disabilities will in fact be able to call in and request service there. But it will be less budgetarily adverse the way that Brian is proposing it than if we had turned those into fixed routes. These are routes that get 5 people. 6 people. I mean, these are not very, they're politically very sensitive routes. But they're not routes that we're ever going to see a tremendous
So
ridership.
what does route deviation do to scheduling?
Well, it makes scheduling very, very important. So yeah, we'll have to educate the users of that system on when those buses will be departing. But basically, you have to schedule those trips such that you still get to the endpoint on time, for all intents and purposes. But yeah, those people who are using that service are gonna need to use the app. So
Ron, are
they
you
can
on?
See what's going on.
Yeah, I'm here, I'm back. I'm cutting in and out, but it's working for now.
Okay, thank you. We're just reviewing the budget, high-level Brian, he's not doing a great job because you're not here, but he's doing well enough for us.
I can't kick him under the table if he's dressed.
So some highlights. We've targeted cuts in cost of about $164,000 compared to FY18. What are you doing there?
Sorry, trying to get my screen so I can minimize it. We got about $25,000 cut in insurance premiums. I don't see those really affecting expenses too much from a claim perspective. We'll be eliminating the forklift lease. We've procured a new forklift. It's on its way, and that sometime this fall. But I'll have some more firm dates on that next time we get together. And then we've got some labor cuts through reorganization and some scheduling adjustments, which we went through those pretty heavily in the executive session. We've incorporated increases in the budget for pension contribution, vacation payouts, and fuel costs. So while we cut way more than $250,000, we had to put some money back in to cover these options. Pension contribution goes up to, I think it's at 14.5% for the authority. It goes up to 15.5% next year. The vacation payouts are, we still have 5 or 6 employees with slugs of vacation, grandfathered vacation from the pre-PTO times. So we're going to get those paid down, and we've come up with a strategy to get those paid down by the end of next calendar year. It reduces the short-term note by $60,000, which we will try to increase that number moving forward, and reserves about $106,000 in local funds by year's end.
The pension increase in the legislature mandated last year, when they approved a multi-year ramp up, when is the last year what they approved?
18%, so it's 3 more years of 1%.
3 more years, okay, gotcha.
Is it 1% cumulatively each year, adding 1 more percent? Yeah. So it's up to 18.
It gets up to 18 in 3 years.
What did-
So moving forward, our goals, obviously, if you can get approval from you all on the budget today, we need to aggressively pay down our liabilities. So we want to use any windfalls from any of these revenue sources or expense cuts to pay down liabilities and improve cash position. So we won't, obviously we're not talking about any service increases per se, but we do want to try to get an O&M reserve as well as get the note paid down. We do, obviously the fare collection issues are, as we discussed, are affecting our bottom line as it relates to the revenue generated in fares. So we need to start thinking about how we're going to address it, and that's a really 2-pronged attack. One is figuring out if there's anything else we can do to minimize the failures of the existing service. And while I don't have it in the budget, we need to think about a planning exercise to look at our fare structure and what kind of investments we need to make for our fare collection equipment here in the near future.
Does this budget include any cost for the entertainment shuttle? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
any fare cost, any required, okay.
Well, I guess it has 515,000 in fares, estimated fares, and we're gonna come in at like 495 this year. So, I've got, and that would be one place where we
Got a
would
goal.
we would make sure that, so depending on the erosion of fare box revenue.
If we were ever gonna put a fare on the entertainment shuttle, what date does that decision need to be made?
Yeah, we got, the interesting thing is, and I gotta look at the FTA regs, you're supposed to go out for a public meeting. But the people who use that service aren't here during the year, so I'm not exactly sure how we would pull that off.
We still have to do that even though it's under 90 days? It's a special service.
I gotta look at the rules, and that's a good point, I don't know.
So early-
90 days isn't long enough to.
There's also issues with, if you're gonna charge some number less than what your base fare is, how you're dealing with
I
that.
have 2 parts, but I still, and I talked about before and never saw the minutes, I should have asked it to be included. I still would like a formal written letter to the enterprises that benefit by the Turner Shuttle, asking them to throw in some money. They may say no, but we never officially ask in writing.
Right.
Before I approve a fare increase, we should at least be turned down by the Ripley's and all of those places. I really think.
We can discuss that.
Wouldn't the
We can
ideal be
discuss that.
to do that shortly after Labor Day? Right after the period where the use for that
They
comes to an
freshen
end.
their minds.
So somewhere in the month of September, there should be a letter that goes to them that, to the beneficiaries of that.
OPM or expanded hours of coverage is, everybody.
We had discussed that last year.
We
You
talked
had
about
that.
And a letter was supposed to go out, but I
Dr. Sheehan,
it never went out.
where are we with the analysis of those surveys?
Shout it out.
And I've got one more weekend.
You got one more to go. We're caught up right now, so.
So that data might be important in how we address.
Right, and in fact, for those, the surveys that we've processed thus far, there is a, at least as to the extent that a survey captures truth, there is a willingness of the ridership, the majority of them to pay $1 for a day's fare. There's no interest in paying an on-off or a multi-day fare.
Or a full day pass.
Right, and unfortunately, the way the question is asked, you know, and I was one of the ones who designed the questions too, so I can kick myself. When we ask about the $1, we didn't ask it per family. It reads as though it is per individual, but we don't know. So a husband-wife or a family of 4 or 5 that are on the entertainment shuttle, we don't know if the willingness to support that $1 is restricted to the family unit that is there. Next time we'll do, you know,
You
a
have
better
to have a
job.
family price then.
Right.
No matter if they have 5
Yeah,
kids,
we
10
didn't
kids.
ask about a
or
family
whatever.
price.
We have already a family fun pass, it's $5. It's for a family of 4,
Yep.
so that might be an option.
Now, Michelle, back to a point I think you were making from the back there. Is there a 90-day, tell me what that 90-day is.
I
Yes, they
vaguely
have
remember,
before.
and this was several years ago, so we have to go back and check, that when we were doing.
Seasonal service.
Right, because it's a seasonal service under 90 days or, you know, the timeline, that we don't have to go to a public meeting because that's what we would have had to have done for all the route changes. We would have had to go every year to the
Oh,
public.
because the route doesn't run 90 days.
Yeah, it's right at 90 days, so, but because it's a seasonal route, that I think that that's an exception to FTA for the public meetings.
So wouldn't it be reasonable for us as a board to ask in the month of September to have this letter going out to the beneficiaries, but also to indicate that beyond October 30th, I think we're too late to establish some type of affair. Now, others might say it should be November or December, but we certainly don't want it to go to February, March, or April as we did last year.
And
So,
by that point, we're designing everything and we're having to give it permitting.
right, so our expectation would be to have this decision be made by the October board meeting. Does that have the head nodding support of the rest of the board?
Yes.
I don't know if that's doable, just because the city's gonna wanna weigh in on that.
Well, let's put our hope and dream out there and give it to be something that wakes you up in the middle of the night.
Okay. And just a question I just have to figure out, the entertainment show, you know, I was telling you when we rode the electric bus that I just come back to Key West, and I've been out of Denver a couple times. They've got basically the same, I guess, kind of thing, and it's free.
Yeah.
Who pays for that?
I don't
Charleston
know,
does
but
also.
nobody's paying for ours.
Charleston and Florence have similar arrangements, and they get basically enough ATAX to fund what would be the fare collection. You're basically prepaying.
But Charleston has a sales tax
Yeah, CVB's
supporting
got
agency.
Charleston.
Yeah, but they've got ATAX coming in that
Also, we're in the hole
essentially
running now.
simulates
We're in the hole.
the fare collection for those
Yes.
routes. Which
Oddly
was not
enough-
what our ask was
They
last
don't pay
year.
almost anything to get on that. They don't have a car. Or
Oddly
they don't
enough,
want to take it out of the garage.
That's what I was saying, was, since it's, it would be a moneymaker, I would think.
Yeah.
Charging money, but I would think the model, that'd be the way to approach the businesses or the city or the chamber, the
Well-
same model that they're using there in Florida and.
Well, our efforts are probably not as well documented as they could be. Michelle and I have been all over people trying to figure out a way to get some funding. And we were pretty successful this year on the advertising thing, so they got a little bit extra, for the money.
obviously, because they
And
got
then we have
some.
a little, we
they
got
got
some other
some-
ideas for next year for the
Right.
advertising.
But, I mean, here's the thing, our ask in the ATAX arena last year was too high. I also have the issue of capital needs for those buses. Those buses are barely making it through
They won't
the
last
summer.
another year.
They're not gonna last, so I gotta figure that out, and I'm not sure where we're gonna go with that yet. And there is some sentiment on council now to even expand it, if you talk to Ms. Jeffco. And I don't, yeah, well, and she
Yeah.
realizes they need to pay for it, but we're at this point now where if we were to cut it, Myrtle Beach would probably reduce the amount of
Yeah,
funding
right.
they're
I
giving,
don't
so we're
think
kind
it's
of,
an
kind of made that bad.
If these
And we
trolleys
really do
are,
need to think about what our ask is of the city. What
What
we're asking the
about-
Hospitality Association is sort of a separate.
if these trolleys aren't going to make it, what are we gonna do? We can't afford to buy new trolleys.
Well, I'm gonna have to
And-
get back
and-
to you on that.
And I don't think they'll be as happy riding on a bus.
Well, I really like those electric buses, but,
I was gonna say that, yeah, the Key West was a bus.
Yeah.
It was.
and we have
did not-
run a bus out there this year because we're not using the green and white spare. Because it's hotter than all get
But what
out.
about-
Charleston's is a green bus.
But what about running the smaller buses?
That's what's out there.
And that's what's, that
Yeah,
you're
we run a
running now?
cutaway.
Yeah.
And I think Rob is right. I think really we need a timeline to decide all this.
Yeah.
Because last year,
It was too late.
there was no decision. I mean, we were already, by the time we ever decided anything, it was too late to do anything.
The ATAX committee
That
that we
happens
went
every year,
to
that's not.
gave us a
Yeah.
very interesting reaction. They basically said, among other things, in addition to saying no, they said, we're very distressed that you're not charging something to begin with. Don't come back to us to ask for anything until you start charging.
Well, I can tell you, because I spent 16 years over there, none of them ever traveled, either on council or on that committee, except me and Mary Jessica, and I'm
Yeah.
not there anymore.
You're right,
And,
right.
it was a godsend in Key West. I mean, I just was stunned that it was free, and it was the greatest thing in the world to get you around. Of course, Key West is smaller, but, and Denver's the same way. And so I wish.
Orlando, 20 years
So-
ago, I paid $5.
So
So
I
part of me
volunteer to
wants
go
to
to
ask.
Savannah and to Charleston to test out their free shuttles. How about that?
So let's, I mean, maybe
You need a
this
list of
isn't,
those
wait a minute.
places.
This isn't necessarily the venue to discuss this. Maybe this is something we put at service pack. I know we don't want to wait too long. But I think the ask ought to be for some equipment this year. Keep it everything the same. We know we can pay for it.
As long as we have advertisement paying for it.
The advantage to
right?
that is it's a
Is that what's
one-time
paying for it,
ask.
the advertisement?
It's one-time
Not
money.
really.
Well,
It's
what's
200
paying-
For
what's-
equipment.
Well,
Our
what's paying is coming out of our budget.
Our funding is paying
Funding.
for it. But we know we can afford it in its current form. And if it's a one-time payment of,
Okay.
$200,000 or $300,000 to go buy
Here's
some
funny.
vehicles
Where
Who's
is
your
it?
ask for one-time payment? That's to the, who you gonna ask for?
ATAX,
Okay,
prior to the committee,
okay.
before it gets to the committee.
But asking Ripley's to give you money in addition to asking, why can't you do both?
Yeah.
We can.
That's what I'm saying.
So
So I guess where I'm at is Rob's suggesting September,
Are
in
you-
response to my thing, that we
We've
send
been trying for
a
18
formal
years and I didn't.
letter shortly after it's done, saying, I hope you enjoyed the expanded good service you guys got
Sounds good.
this past year. We have all the survey data, and then you pursue the other money also to replace the vehicles. But again, I talked about this last year and I was on it. I want a letter to go to the Ripleys of the world and the hotels. We got $15,000 from one entertainment enterprise last year, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got more than that. We got money from Ripley's for advertising.
Well, I'm talking about
Yeah,
that.
but we're talking about
And
running
the
the.
15,000 from Myrtle Waves was also for advertising.
Well, that's how it ended up, but that was.
Because we are being recorded, I think this would be a good conversation for another meeting, like a committee meeting or something else.
So when was it before January 1st?
But I also wanted to say that the advertising venue is an opportunity for some of these potential supporters to get, their first look at what we're doing and were we effective for them and what they saw, so that, I just think that we can have a really in-depth discussion after, maybe early September.
And advertising goes, can you advertise? I don't know. Can you advertise inside bus and outside bus?
You can advertise on anything.
Yeah, I picked out the fleet.
So you
Put it on the floor, you put it on the
We've been
ceiling.
considering the floors.
Size of the,
The
You can
floors,
do
yeah,
it,
the floors have been
can you
pitched.
advertise on the signs now?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, one
You
time
do
the
full
city did that,
wraps.
the cabs did that
Yeah.
also.
No,
Do
we-
full
we-
wraps. I've
Have
seen,
you seen
I've
our
seen a couple of
buses?
those out there. We haven't let Michelle wrap a new bus yet, but
Brian, I think asking the beneficiaries for
Transit advertising.
them to contribute
Is we're considering
and
mobile billboard.
asking the city for capital money is brilliant. I mean, I've used that word twice now, and I don't use it very often,
Yeah,
as
that's
well you
pretty
know. But it
it's like
removes,
cutting my flow.
well, but it removes out of the discussion the potential users, which is what is causing you to lose sleep at night, is trying to figure out how to fit that into, first of all, it slows the road down.
Yeah, we don't want to charge a fare. We don't have to.
And you've got families getting on there, so I think where your hesitation is you don't want to charge the users. I'm not opposed to, I support that hesitation, but I do think that making it very clear that we need the capital dollars there. And the answer to the question, how much capital do you need? I think you need one bus each year. I think we need to replace one of the two buses, one of the two trolleys this year, and I think we need to replace one of the two trolleys the next year as well to get us, into a point where we're functional. And so let's not discuss this to the point where, first of all, I don't think the PAC group is going to contribute much more to the discussion than we have right here.
Right.
It is us. And so I do think that by end of October, a very clear statement of where we're going next is not at all unreasonable, unless we were to try to figure out how to tax the users. And then I think that then becomes a problem.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So we have added to your to-do list. We've actually got 3 items added to the to-do list. I will summarize them by the end of the meeting. Update AECom.
Yeah, that's coming. That's coming.
And then September report on Farebox for the other 2 items. You want a red pen?
So
Put
one
little
thing,
stars.
one thing that we do need to do is improve our insurance claim procedures. I think there's still a good $35,000 in accident claims as far back as 2016 that haven't been resolved yet. And I just haven't had time to eyeball it. I could be wrong on that, but it's a big number and something that we've got to get better at doing, especially claims where we're dealing with our own insurance company. The ones that happen with somebody else, when somebody else is at fault, those happen pretty quickly, I think. But we have 8 or 9 open claims from prior to October 1st of last year. So I need someone who's staying on top of that.
One of the county council members that I spoke to recently pointed out a recent accident in which one of our buses actually swiped street light. So these are pretty high visible activities. These are things that people pick up on. And I guess it reinforces the need to.
Well, and even the bad one that we had this summer where we hit the light pole, the initial estimate didn't happen until like 45 days after the accident. So that bus has been sitting there.
That's not responsible.
And it's, we gotta stay on top of that stuff and so that's a key goal. It's gonna help us from and even charging our labor, when we're doing the repairs, charging our labor to the insurance.
Do we have any lawsuits from that accident?
Not yet, but there's a long time coming on that, so. And then identifying capital investments to improve operational efficiency. I have a couple that are in the hopper. The EcoLane paratransit software is who we've selected to upgrade over Route Match. And so we're in contract negotiations with them. But their claim on their software is that it really helps in a real-time situation. It's constantly monitoring where the vehicles are and recalculating what the most efficient way to pick up our scheduled passengers are.
I thought that was paid for by the state.
and that's completely paid for by the state. It's coming, it should be in place here for certainly by the beginning of the calendar year, hopefully sooner. But I think that's helping us in a number of ways. One, it allows me to reallocate some of those dispatch and reservationists into the regular CSR. They're gonna be answering phones and things like that, because this is push-button scheduler. It also allows users of the system to schedule their own appointments. And then it has a real-time dashboard, so I can go online any day and look at, see who's behind schedule, where they are, who's sitting around, all those types of things. So I'm hopeful that it's gonna eliminate, it's not gonna eliminate, it's gonna reduce sitting around by drivers, which happens a lot. It's gonna give us a little better handle if somebody has, let's say somebody has a cancellation at 2 o'clock and they have to sit from, they were gonna sit from 1 to, or they're gonna sit from 12:30 to 1:30, and then they get the cancellation at 2 o'clock, so they're gonna be sitting until 3 o'clock. We send that person home and put the rest of their trips on to somebody else. And so that's what this system is really designed to handle. So I'm hopeful that that'll work, and that's just an example.
We use different software to manage the paratransit route from the fixed routes that we have. And this new software that we've got coming in has been mediated by the state, and they're picking up the initial cost of it as well. So it's not something, we've been using our own, different software, so it's a change in software. That's the background for that.
So service expansion will be on hold, obviously, but it is time to start the conversations, and obviously there will need to be additional funding in order to do anything of any significance.
Now, you can make this board member very happy if you go back and edit that slide and put in parentheses, until debt paid down in the middle of the
But
sentence.
the previous side, I had paid.
You did,
Oh,
thank
no,
you.
it's the first
Paid down,
bullet.
aggressively paid down liability.
Yeah.
And there was not a single typo in there, so I know it wasn't a rush job on your part.
Yes.
Is there a spell
So this
check?
is our last 5 years plus next year. I just wanted to, for comparison purposes, wanted to show, this is the use of 5307. This was, these FY16 column is a 15-month year, so all those numbers are inflated. But then we used almost the same amount. Remember going into 2017, or 2018, we knew that this budget was getting tight. If you could see why we're in hock.
Are these calendar or fiscal years?
These are fiscal years. So this
And
is
they're
October,
adjusted to be back to the federal start to October 1?
October to September.
Great.
2016.
See, we had quite a bit of surplus at the end of the year, which went towards spending a lot of this, but we ended up spending this on a lot of capital things like the transit center and a number of other hiccups along the ways. But that was in the budget, which is why I thought these numbers were going to go okay. And so then in 18, we're actually a little over budget. But this number doesn't include some of the small revenue numbers, like there's like 25,000 in county capital money that went towards refurbishments that are still in our capital coffers. There's 40,000. I mean, this is really should be at zero. Because I can correct these numbers. But I was going through audits and all sorts of stuff to try to come up with these numbers. So FY19 as it compares to FY18, you can see salaries and wages goes down considerably. Fuel goes up. Maintenance is remaining close to being unchanged. We put a few more dollars in there. Overhead and things goes, I mean, this is like our insurance savings and some of the things that we found. And then this is fares plus advertising revenue.
What source did you use for fuel estimates for next year?
I went and looked at the website. It's like the Office of
It's a federal agency.
the federal agency that looks at CPI and other things. And it basically says that fuel prices are remaining steady. I think it said fuel was going up, or gas was going up like one cent, and diesel was going to stay about the same.
Wow.
for FY19.
But you put more than that in there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where are you projecting a decline in operating revenue and fares for 2019?
Well, this one has got the SC Works contract in it. Two routes.
Yes, yeah, the grant.
So we don't have that. Good catch. So obviously, we're trying to get lower on this. This is something, I mean, the strategy for rural money is different. I want to pull down as much as I can, you know, whatever the state's going to make available, and use that for operating costs. And that's just kind of the way the rural program runs. And so this does include 100,000 in that augmented budget, but I think it'll be at least that high, if not higher. And so this incorporates Horry, Georgetown, and Myrtle Beach.
How about Conway, did they do anything this time? Nothing? How about
You didn't get anything, Conway?
Lewis owes 7,500, we haven't billed it yet, we need to bill it.
Yeah, you don't have it in the budget.
I don't have any money from Conway in the budget.
You didn't get anything.
Well, they also contribute about 80,000 to the county user fee, so
Which means
they
what?
figured I was enough. It's, so, you know, we got $1 million extra in county money, but we lost about 100,000 from Myrtle Beach, you know,
So maybe this is.
15,000 from
So
Conway.
maybe this wasn't such a great deal.
No, that is.
Well, it's a great deal
Bottom
because
line,
it's
that's a great deal, and it has
it's
the
a growth,
ability to
it's
grow.
got growth.
Yeah, it's gross,
It's pretty, it's a good deal.
if we can talk them into giving us what.
Which really puts the pressure on this funding equity plan that I just need to get John Peterson and Mike and Chris Eldridge together and I mean, I guess Adam as well, just to get them to agree to some sort of formula for, you know, looking at how we're splitting up our operating
But
costs.
even if you take out Conway 15,000 and the city 100,000, we're still very much to the positive, even without growth. We're still very much to the positive, right?
About
right there.
900,000.
Yeah.
So let's not feel too bad about that.
Well, yeah, but 900,000 is, you know, it's, some of it's going to these two numbers, obviously, to recover from that. You know, if you looked at the comments percentages, you know, their federal participation in their operating cost is below 20%. And so with this, ours is going to be in
You know,
the 35 to 38%.
the problem is, every time we get more money, we only get enough money to sustain, to see what we got going already. We never get enough that we can make new routes or whatever.
We
Well,
would if we had the debt paid off.
Yeah.
If that debt was paid off,
Yes.
this would
Well,
be a
evidently
true
it's not.
new source of funds or new volume of funds, which we could then almost immediately put into route expansion if we knew what we wanted.
Right. But it's gonna be how long?
If we wanted to do, remember the retreat, 2 retreats ago, where we had that plan, where we have that vision, you know, that's got a lot more service up in the northern part of the county, that's gonna take about $4 million a year in local funds to do. So we're a long way from that, but, you know, we're at 2.4 for Horry County, or 2 point, actually it's less than that, 2.2 in Horry County, so.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm donating 2 cars.
$13.
Yep, and I drive both of them.
So this is, hopefully folks can see this, but this is a 5-year outlook, going forward. I'm assuming 3% increase in expenses from year to year. It's got, I still got some tie-outs to do here, but that's what we're actually gonna be paying down on the debt, if we just keep paying the note the way it's set up right now. Obviously, we can adjust that as we move forward. We had 90,000 in year 2 and then 207,000 in year 3. The most important number here is to show how we're doing on budget from year to year.
Yeah, bottom line.
So this is the cash after the end of the year, so this is not cumulative. You could add those together and how much we have in reserve. Year 5 has got some issues, and I haven't spent a lot of time looking at it, why, but, obviously, we're good.
In the Conway Bank, I know we started out 60,000, budget with a 90 in the next year, then all of a sudden, a 200,000 payoff in the third year. Right? I read it.
That's the way it's set up, but I think we might be able to, I would like to reverse that.
We've asked Brian to visit with Conway National Bank and to come up with a different repayment schedule, one that is more aggressive.
Salary, okay.
So I plan on showing the bank all of this information and see what they say.
Would be happy.
Can I get a hard copy of this slide and the previous one? Not the next time I see it.
Sure.
Wow.
All right. From a timing point of view, Brian, where are we relative to resolutions in general manager? Well, we've already done executive session. I don't anticipate we're gonna have old business. I'm gonna suggest on new business, we determine the meeting schedule at the next meeting.
Okay.
So I think, we just wanna know how you're doing relative.
Bernie has a copy.
I have one more slide on budget and then I go to general manager report. Yes. So, just the last thing is what the capital plan is, and that's laid out on the sheet that I handed out. We have 320,000 in the bus stop project that's happening as we speak. It should be up and running in September. That's actually more money than we originally planned for the first slug of stops. I'm thinking we're gonna get on the order of 200 stops for that money, that first slug of money. I have.
And from Randall's point of view, how many stops do we have altogether in our system?
450.
Would we have
450.
Okay.
We have assigned some of our $53.39 to the state so that we could augment the award that we got. This was the spring. We got 500,000 in federal discretionary dollars for bus buy. That only pays for one, and then you have a bunch of money left over. So it's 500,000 in discretionary funds, 88,000 in state funds, and then so we're augmenting that with about 150,000 in 5339, and using 150,000 from the county to purchase 2 more new flyers, and those will replace our buses. We've got money in the budget for 2 small transits, which are pictured to the right over here. Those are going to replace, we're going to get 2 of those, and those are going to replace the 2 cutaways we got from state surplus 2 years ago. These are 9-passenger vehicles. You can see the lift comes out of the back, which is different for us from a operational standpoint. But these get on the order of 20 miles to the gallon as opposed to 9.5 that those cutaways do. And so I think we want to enter these into paratransit and see how they do.
Are there any concerns about whether that's less safe than exiting on the sidewalk side?
Well, you've got to have a different amount of space, obviously, than if you were just pulling up to the sidewalk. But it is much better for the suspension in the vehicle. In fact, all vans, they used to be like that back in the day. It works really well if you're backing into their driveway.
Yeah.
You know, those types of things. So it's got good points, it's got bad points, it's just something that they're gonna have to get used to. And
Well, and curb cuts would be an issue.
right,
as well.
you are negotiating someone in a wheelchair potentially off of a curb, which is never fun.
I mean, if that's,
9 seated, and but that varies depending on, you can put up to 2 wheelchair clients in.
I know.
So the International's replacement, we have 2 buses that we parked back in 2015 that became an FMO finding because they have quite a bit of federal equity left in them. I don't think the RTA is going to let me replace those vehicles with the ones that we've identified with the. In fact, I know they're not going to let me do a 1-for-1 exchange because the original value of those vehicles is considerably less than the original value of our vehicles, which makes sense. I knew it was a stretch. I was hoping to get a little bit of latitude from RTA on that. I've since gone back to them, and they are looking at the possibility of, if the value of the incoming vehicle is 50% of the value of the outgoing vehicle, can I take 50% of the equity and put it into that car and into that vehicle? But we're looking at probably taking, we had an existing grant in there, at FTA for 3 long cutaways, just reducing that grant by the amount of the equity. So we're gonna lose some federal money as a result of that.
You're done with it.
But then we'll be done with it. And I think we may buy at least the newer of those 2 incoming vehicles anyway. Just because our other long cutaway is dying. So we're using Georgetown capital funding to pull that exchange off.
I hate to go backwards, but I've lost the bubble. It's AECom and sign. And Bernie very early mentioned that, he said, should we be worried? The start of that is not AECom, it's we don't have the money yet, it's the hold up there.
Can't give them the go-ahead until I have the money.
And that's
in place.
September 21st.
By September 21st.
And then a few seconds ago, you had mentioned with the first slug of signs, and we get that.
200 plus signs.
Yeah, so that 300 whatever thousand. So to finish the sign project, there's more money that ain't coming yet. Yeah, so,
It's coming, it just hasn't been identified yet.
well, okay, I got you. So I'm mentioning, after September 21st, we have the money here till we start putting that first sign in the ground, hopefully before 1 January, right? To finish the 400 and whatever 15 stops, there's more yet identified money that's gotta come later to finish out that project.
Correct.
Okay.
But we've known that for forever.
Well, I guess I lost the bubble when all this was fitting
Yeah.
into
We
place.
never had an ending in sight.
Yeah. But
Well,
when you
and
ask
if we
that
do any
question
new
about,
routes, we're gonna need to put stop signs
Yeah.
on that too.
but when you mentioned, should we be worried? I didn't know if you're worried about AECom wasn't performing, and as part of that is it ain't them, it's us.
It's us.
Okay, gotcha. I'm with, you're right.
We gotta get the facility due diligence
Okay.
project up and running, so that will start, the initial draft of the grant is in the system, but we won't get FCA to look at it until after, the trams shut down, but we will get moving on that. Myrtle Beach Transit Center, we got an estimate for a new floor, and it's actually came in very reasonable, $14,000. So there's $60,000 in the budget that I can move somewhere else. We may, I think, we gotta dot the i's and cross the t's with what exactly they're doing, so that number might oscillate, but it does look like I'm gonna be able to get that done.
Now that you have a lower number, do you anticipate not going back to the city for a contribution to that?
Well, they've done quite a bit of legwork on this, and they may give me some in-kind labor as a part of doing this, which I'm hopeful that they'll do, but no, we don't need the city on this. What I do need from you all is a resolution. We want to suspend our procurement rules, because that's over $10,000. Technically, we're supposed to go get quotes. But I'm treating this as an emergency repair.
That's the second one.
That's the second resolution that you have in front of you. We feel that
It is an emergency.
it's very
It's a
much
safe-
an
it's a
emergency,
safety
and
hazard.
we've got a really good local contractor who gave us a much better quote than the one we got from a non-local contractor.
Maybe they could put the wall up in the men's room at the same time.
The wall's up in the middle.
Oh, is it up
Been
there?
up there.
Have
Have you been down there? I checked it out.
There's a door frame. The door frame in the women's bathroom is damaged, so we're gonna get them to replace that. Something like that. So we'll also probably do the water heater. The water heater is going to be a
The
tankless.
infamous water heater. Yeah.
So
Oh, it's
that's.
gonna be a tankless. Good, I suggested that.
Well, when they built that unit, they didn't
They
realize,
talk about that, it's peanuts.
you didn't realize that you're gonna have people walking in.
Well, probably not as many as we've had in there. I feel like we're kind of overusing that building for really what it was originally constructed for. But the joists, there's two things. The joists underneath are 4 feet apart, and so there's a lot. They didn't use thick enough board to handle the in between the
4-inch
joists.
plywood as you're flooring across 4
Yeah,
foot
it's half inch.
distance in your joists.
It's half inch, but.
Yeah.
So we're gonna put some more joists in there, we're gonna beef up the flooring. And then the other thing is the air conditioning unit is not draining outside of the building. It's draining within that little apron. And so it's adding moisture down there that we don't want, so we're gonna fix that as well. $2.64 million total on your capital program. That's it for the budget. So hopefully you have enough information to approve it later.
I added a note to Lynette's notes to do, figure out why the dimmer doesn't work on this. This is like a Lowe's Home Depot thing. We should be able to have some balance between light and no light.
You're using dimmer or fluorescent lights, it's not a cheap process. Oh, the expensive ballast change you gotta do.
And that may not,
It won't
it may
work.
not even be connected. I'll get
Yeah.
$10,000.
$10,000.
Take a look at it.
Well, forget it, that's what it is.
No, it ain't that, it's, you got fluorescent, the dimmers and the.
It looks like
This
we
is on
checked
lawn.
that.
We did $8,000, I just have to pay $8,000 for new crowns. Finally going to get this bridge done.
Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, you need something to eat, I'll be glad to go get you something out of the vending machine.
Right?
You need something to eat, I'd be glad
No,
to get you
no,
something.
that's okay. I can make, we're gonna be,
I think we're at the end of the real
We
gentleman.
can
The general manager's report is can be very quick, we've already talked about it, we gotta address the rest of Bernie's.
I got only a minute.
Let's
I got
vote
one more
on the,
minute.
let's vote on the resolutions
Do the
before we do the
resolutions.
GM report. And also, let's ask whether Marvin feels strongly enough about the budget that we want to get his signature on this as well. I think he would be supportive of it. I think it would be better not to have a budget that goes off minus,
That's a finance committee chair.
yes.
Well, he said he.
I appreciate that,
And he
yes.
can stop.
Especially if Mr. Loftus doesn't see his name there.
Correct.
All right, let's do that.
So with your permission, we're moving ahead. We're postponing the finish of the general manager's report, moving to the approval of the resolutions, which means I can flip the damn dimmer.
Oh, good, a little heat.
Oh, goodness.
All right, Lynette, would you care to get this into the
I will be
resolutions?
more than happy to. Waccamaw Regional Transportation Authority Resolution Number August 2018-13, approval of draft FY 2019 budget.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept resolution number 2018-13, which is the FY19 budget?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that resolution 2018-13, the FY19 budget, be approved. Is there any discussion of that?
I just want to say that this will now, once we get through this process, now goes to the Horry County Transportation Committee meeting for their review.
I've added that to my calendar as well. so I'll
And
join you.
it's Monday,
That's
September 10th. And I will make a point of getting down to Georgetown and at least presenting it to whomever Sal would like me to present it to.
I think it's Monday at 3:30, isn't it?
It's at 3, I
3
think.
o'clock.
I sent it out to all the board this morning, so if you accept it, it should go in your Outlook calendar.
Okay,
Yeah, I got it
all right.
And I'll send it to you too.
If we have no additional discussion, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the resolution, please say nay. Okay, the resolution passes. Moving on.
Waccamaw Regional Transportation Authority, Resolution Number August 2018-14, approval to override internal purchasing cost thresholds for emergency repairs to the Myrtle Beach Transfer Center 4.
All right, we have a resolution. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution
So
to
moved.
override internal purchasing cost thresholds?
So moved.
Okay.
And is there a second?
Second.
Gerald, second. Any discussion? Again, this is a resolution that gets the flooring finished and perhaps the water heater installed, but certainly the flooring finished in the Myrtle Beach Transit Center. There being no discussion, all those in favor of resolution 2018-14, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. All right, now we can return to the general manager's
in.
report.
You want to take these, back until next time? Because you have to print them all over again. No?
Yeah, if you want to just put them in the center of the table, I'll pick them up.
I didn't see that in the calendar, and I apologize.
That's all right. It's in the
Proposed
last
dates
list.
for meetings.
Do you want to move on that?
Should be in your package. It's,
Under new business?
either way, it's
It's the
okay.
last page in your packet.
Well, you have yours on
I
the
mean, I think you ought to keep them and just.
Hold on to it until next time.
Have any concerns?
What I did, I have the day and the month, and I just left the date blank, and then on the back is the remainder of the 2018 plus the 2019 calendar through September.
So we will proceed ahead with the September 2018 meetings, and we'll get final comment on that at that meeting. Okay, Brian, wrap it up.
Okay,
We've
Just-
interrupted your flow.
just to give the board a little bit of an update, I won't take too long on this. I think I've got 3 slides total. And then obviously we've got to, hopefully I've addressed your other issues, but if not, you can let me know once they're sober. We already, we are in the process, the stop enunciation system is not performing the way we would like it to perform, so we are going to engage Ride Systems to help us figure out what needs to happen. There's a number of issues. We are putting a tablet on the bus. Originally, those tablets were assigned to drivers, and they were coming, and then so they would bring them in, they'd put them in the bus, they'd plug them in, the plugs would come undone. The Bluetooth that connects into the speaker system is unreliable, and then the geofencing, which is engaging the tablet to make the stop announcement, isn't working the way we'd like it to work. So there's a lot happening there. We've tried to make some improvements where we're keeping the tablets on the buses rather than having them move around as much.
How much of that is our problem if we've got to re-engage the vendor on that? I mean, will they be charging us to re-engage them for service?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think part of the issue that they can have with us is that we installed them. But the geofencing they need to fix. That's on them. So just getting you guys a heads up that it's a work in progress, and we will be engaging them. I think we've got a little bit of guinea pig syndrome associated with this. I don't know that the Ride System's main business is ABL app, doing the app, which I think is working reasonably well.
Randall, the stop enunciation is the announcement that goes off each time the bus gets approaching a stop. It automatically says, Kroger's coming up on your right.
We're still entering on the same issue when we talk about Strobus, but there is some instance of when it doesn't work once, then those who are supposed to be using it don't trust it and won't make the adjustments to make it work the second time. So I'm still working against that a little bit. Same holds true for Strobus. I think the new payroll system went off as well as to be expected. We had some issues related to how they've changed how taxes are taken out of the checks based on rules that they perceive, I guess. We also had this issue where Coast RTA does a $30 payment to all employees to go towards their health care, health insurance. I'm not even sure what the reason why that's even in there the way it is, but that money was being taxed instead of being part of healthcare reimbursement. So we had these little $1 and $2 and $3 hiccups in the amount of money that was being taken out for taxes. So that being said, paychecks for an individual's paychecks were sort of bouncing all over the place as we move through the process, which has made staff a little bit leery of whether or not the payroll's happening right. I think we reasonably believe that it is being right. We had some adjustments come through that, cost people some money, or at least perceived that it cost them some money. And so we're working through that. We've had issues with the thumbprint clock And I think that stems a lot from people not trusting the payroll service, so that doesn't work for them, so they don't make it work for them. So we're working through that. I think we're moving forward, but I just want to make you aware that we have had some issues on the payroll side of things. Certainly the data is better.
My iPad, the thumbprint sign-in probably works half the time. The other
Yeah.
half it does not, whether it's sweat or, you know, being out in the garage or working or whatnot, but I'm not surprised to hear
Well,
that that's less.
And the sort of the education of the general user and how they can access their timesheet and all of their benefits and their pay statement and all that stuff has sort of been lost on a few folks. And we're working through additional training to help people do that. We are going to replace this clock with one that allows you to look at your pay stub or whatever you want to look at that, you know, by using your thumbprint rather than logging into this machine that's back here in the driver's room. So we're trying to meet folks in the middle on making that system work for us. But I think in general, you know, the system has a lot of upside in terms of helping us maintain our payroll and giving managers real-time data on, you know, how many overtime hours they've spent this week and those types of things. So I think we've talked to the Ecom and Ecolane to death. We already talked a lot about all these grants, but right now in the system we have bus stop grant, we have our FY19 O&M, which is not going to make the deadline, but it should be opened up really quickly in October after the trams shut down. We've been working with our planner at RTA to get it to the point where she can get through the process. Facility due diligence project is now moving towards the top of my list to get that going so that we do have shovel-ready projects for a new maintenance facility or new passenger facilities in case money comes available. And then SCDOT is working on bus purchase.
How many buses do we expect to get out of the SCOT?
Two, but they are replacing DART buses, which I think is notable.
I love dark buses.
You love those DART buses?
Seats more comfort.
Yeah.
And air conditioning is great, heat's great.
I think the biggest, aside from loss of comfort, the new buses have considerably better fuel mileage than those DART buses. DART buses are only getting about 4.5 miles to the gallon, so.
Sit on one, sit on the new bus.
Yeah.
More bad.
Pass out pillows.
And they're gonna be the same size, right?
They're gonna be just like the ones that we've already got. They're in that same procurement. So we've been relatively happy with the new buses. We cut close to 100,000 miles on each one of them already, so they're getting used.
The one over, oh, you have one that's,
One that's at the body shop.
right.
So, bus and bus facilities grant. These are purchases that we're making that are completely funded by the state. We got the forklift. We got the forklift for $45,000. We had $55,000 budgeted, so we got a little money to play around with in that grant for some other stuff. We will be doing some preventive maintenance for our cash handling system, the drawer and everything like that, where you're pulling the fare boxes and putting the money in the system needs some work. And then we'll be procuring some maintenance software as well. And Candace and Tom are working on what that's gonna look like.
What are we using the forklift for?
Drop
Is
it
that
in.
the
You name
pickup
it.
motors?
Pick up motors, put them
Right.
in, move the
Okay.
buses when they're not powered, you know, all that.
Oh,
good
it'll
stuff.
move a bus? Really?
Yep. We're getting ready for our SCDOT audit. This is essentially the triennial review for our rural program. That's happening that second week in September. So I think it's the 12th and 13th, which is a Wednesday and a Thursday. They'll be in town. I don't really expect it to be too bad. I think we've got our ducks in a row enough to where the state is going to be comfortable with how we're doing things. We've got the Oregon County Transportation Budget Review. Advertising is still going well. I would say the biggest problem is lack of inventory, right, Michelle? We've got surveys happening, we already talked about that, and ridership, which is what we're all here for, continues to rise. I was looking at
August, and it's gonna be pretty close to 68, 69,000 for the month, which is right on par with last year. So, you know, things are, you know, doing well from the service.
Michelle, call me as soon as those surveys from Labor Day are in, for Labor Weekend.
I can do it every.
And that's all I had.
Working till
Did
midnight
you
Monday,
need anything
so-
else answered? I guess the
I got one more thing. First of all, that you're ridiculing my list is not going to deter me. So.
I'm not ridiculing your list.
So you can forget it.
I thought it was in the standard operating procedure that you would send me the list prior to the meeting.
Oh, I should have done that. But my last thing is that the next committee meeting falls on a Jewish holiday, Yom Kippur. And I wondered if people would think about changing that or just
Let's change it. I don't want to have it on a day that conflicts with that.
No, I
Well-
don't want to have
well,
a religious holiday.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Matt. Here's the thing. I have, we have the SCPOT the week before. And so, and I'm just hoping to take Thursday and Friday off of that week after the meeting. I go play in my dad's member guest tournament. So if we're gonna move it, it still needs to be that week, so Monday or Tuesday of that week. So the 19th, Nice holiday.
out for me, but any other
19th
day
is
that
a
week is
Wednesday.
fine.
19th is a Wednesday.
My schedule will permit a Monday morning, not a Tuesday morning. Because I teach on Tuesday mornings.
what about a Tuesday afternoon?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's
that's
good, because 17th, I
That's the
think,
week I'm out.
We,
can't give
we
up
have,
bridge.
what?
I'm out that week.
So you're gonna miss the
Okay.
meeting anyway.
I'll call.
We
18th.
have, we have finance and service pack scheduled for morning of the 19th. And Mr.
Wanna move
Silverman
it
has
to the
asked to
20th?
move it,
To the
No,
18th,
I can't
no.
do the 20th.
Oh, that's right.
how about the 18th?
So I'm hoping that we can do it the 18th,
That's fine.
Tuesday?
maybe the afternoon of the 18th.
Do it, I don't need to be there for that
What
particular
time?
meeting either, so if it's morning is most convenient for people to go on with that.
No,
I'll do my
afternoon
part.
is fine.
Yeah, me
So,
too.
so let's do this, let's
1
let
o'clock,
Lynette
2?
send
One.
out, let's talk with Lily Jean and Marvin and make sure that they can make it,
Yeah.
and then
They're
send
key.
out an
But
invite.
it's not gonna be on the 19th.
It will not be on the 19th.
So we're looking at the afternoon of the 18th. Okay.
And if they have a conflict with that, ask the morning.
And what holiday is
I'll
that?
be out of town, so
Yom Kippur.
Oh, you,
I'll be coming back.
is that a fasting?
That's the fast
That is a
Oh,
fasting,
yeah.
yeah.
No, I don't do
Yeah,
mine.
I
I do celebrate mine.
Yeah, you do, why not?
Oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah.
2 hours and 45 minutes.
I mean, another option is the 26th before the board and just have the committee. meeting.
No, it's too early before the board.
It was great.
I'm not being here.
Almost Washington.
I gotta get up at 5 o'clock and sleep with
Washington.
my clothes
I
on.
think that's a no.
Yeah.
I was just,
I know.
We're gonna send out an invite
Yeah.
to everybody on that.
I'm not sure Marvin's teaching
Do we have
schedule.
any-
And I will be,
I
I will
have
be
one,
here for
one
transportation.
thing. Have we, let the evaluation drop to the ground?
No, we haven't. We
Waiting on you.
We delayed it. I will send you all a memo
We need the
on
goals.
accomplishments and goals.
Right,
Yeah,
Good.
that's.
So I'll get that out before,
see, I mentioned that.
Yeah, I had that.
we'll get that out by the end of next week.
Yeah, we delayed it until
One other,
we get Brian's goals and
Tuesday, the
Right,
18th.
accomplishments.
Afternoon.
So
Tentatively
it's
scheduled that day.
September.
I gotta check with the chair.
Tentatively for September is what we get.
Now, this bridge, when are they gonna
thinking,
start
yeah.
working on this bridge?
It's my understanding January.
Oh, in January, oh.
I'm 3 months, January, February,
I
March.
came the other way, I thought they were working on it now.
Working on what's
Oh, the bridge, the
Kingston
bridge
Bridge.
I come over from.
You had
You
to
can,
you had to
you
get
can take
there.
Reeves Ferry,
Oh, Reese Ferry
cut over to
Now
905.
5 and straight in on 4th Avenue.
That works
Reeves
good.
Ferry.
It's a road that comes in diagonally to 90 right there by the car dealer,
Oh, by, yeah,
right
yeah.
before, as you're coming
Oh,
south.
We took that once when he picked me up, when, one
Yeah,
of
it
the
comes
fellows
out
picked me
kind
up
of right
on
down here
that.
on 4th Avenue.
I am
Yes.
enjoying International Boulevard, however.
Very much.
You
Just don't
use that
speed on it.
No, I set my cruise, so I don't speed on it.
Well, okay.
You ever go to Myrtle Beach?
Yes,
Sorry.
Being on
Or
the
you
board.
take international, go to Myrtle Beach?
Well, to get to my house, I don't know.
Kitty, if you
First-
turn right on,
Big meeting.
that,
So you want
Lot
to?
of
It's
headaches.
not just
Lot of
like,
headaches.
usually it's much shorter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when I run my meetings at
Uh,
I
very
God,
close.
I move 'em.
I'm
This
assuming,
one usually moves
Take
a
it
lot,
right
a lot
there,
quicker
you'll-
than this.
I'm assuming we have, we've covered old business, which is a revised date
This
for
morning,
that
instead
report.
of getting,
Use your gavel back.
instead of getting 90.
Power goes to my head. With no new business that I'm aware of, no announcements, I have a motion to adjourn.
What about
So-
city
So
attorney?
moved.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
We are in adjournment.